Good afternoon, folks, and welcome back to the IGES mid-year briefing. If you were able to participate with us a little while ago, you were part of what was a very engaging dialogue from representatives of corrections, probation, parole, of course. We had Marcus Hodges and we had Tom Herzog, both great friends to IGES, and a lot of experience that not only speaks to the past, but some hope for the future. I have absolutely no doubt that our next speaker, Senator Bartolotta from the state of Pennsylvania, will do us very proud in her dialogue, in her discussion, and in sharing the experiences from the state of Pennsylvania. The senator was first elected in 2014 and re-elected in 2018. She is part of the leadership of the Pennsylvania criminal justice reform. And some of her priorities speak to the very topics that we were chatting about earlier. Challenges with reducing recidivism, with reentry, with connecting inmates to resources to smoothen that transition back into communities, dealing with examples like house plans, driver's license, transportation efforts, going for what is the total picture that often when we do our day-to-day jobs, we miss some of the qualitative issues that unfortunately have been lost in the effort as part of our justice world these days. That being said, Senator, we couldn't be happier to host you here at IGES. We have a great topic that I think you're going to contribute to wildly. So allow me to pass the virtual baton to you and bring you onto stage. So Senator.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. And it looks like it's quite the large group listening in. So that's excellent. Thanks so much for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak at the IGES mid-year briefing and member forum. And it really is a privilege to share with you some of the exciting criminal justice reform changes happening in Pennsylvania. This is a topic that I am very passionate about. In 2018, I started the state Senate's first bipartisan criminal justice reform caucus. The goal of our caucus is to use evidence-based research to help promote safer communities, reduce prison costs, reduce recidivism, and ensure better outcomes for individuals who are part of the criminal justice system. As part of that effort, I'm proud to have supported the passage of Pennsylvania's historic clean slate law. The first of its kind law has helped give hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians a new lease on life by sealing more than 30 million records. Last session, we further strengthened the law by making expungement automatic when an individual receives a full acquittal in the same alleged criminal episode. Helping more Pennsylvanians benefit from the clean slate law will streamline reentry to the workforce and level the playing field without any harm to public safety. Criminal records should not be a lifelong barrier preventing successful reentry and work in society. The best strategy to reduce recidivism is to ensure those who have earned their second chance actually have the available resources to overcome barriers and biases. While Pennsylvania has made meaningful reforms in recent years, there is much more to be done. And I want to share details about two important proposals that I am presently working to advance. The first one is Senate Bill 5, which I've sponsored with Senator Anthony Williams of Philadelphia. It would provide for comprehensive probation reform. We have a system in place today that sends probationers to jail for committing traffic violations or taking a day trip to the beach. This system does not serve the public interest. Currently, under Pennsylvania law, an individual can spend many months on the outside under probation supervision, but if the person commits a technical violation, all of the sentencing options are back on the table that were available at the start of the case. This means that the person gets no credit for the time spent going to work, taking classes, or reporting to a probation officer. It means that a lengthy term in state prison or county jail could be in their future. Most people don't realize probation can be revoked for a number of reasons that do not include new criminal offenses. Making matters more challenging is the fact that some provisions of probation supervision can be very ambiguous or challenging to achieve, such as requiring them to avoid disreputable places and disreputable persons. A large majority of criminal offenders come from and return to neighborhoods that many might find disreputable. And if they lack transportation, a driver's license, money, and resources that many of us take for granted, making appointments without fail is an uphill battle every day. Add to this that courts may revoke probation if they feel it is essential to vindicate the authority of the court. That's a pretty arbitrary statement. I fully support the idea that criminal offenders must learn to live responsibly and be accountable for their actions. But the heavy hammer of incarceration and long terms of probation with burdensome conditions are failed methods to achieve positive outcomes for offenders. If a probationer messes up and violates probation terms in some minor technical way, the solution is not simply more confinement. In fact, this approach has proven both ineffective at making our neighborhoods safer and very expensive for taxpayers. The nonpartisan Council of State Governments issued a report a couple of years ago indicating that Pennsylvania spends $100 million every year to incarcerate offenders who commit technical violations of probation and parole. Senate Bill 5 limits probation terms to 3 years for misdemeanors and 5 years for felonies. The probation officers are the ones on the front lines of this issue, and they will tell you that supervision problems arise in the first 12 months. If an offender shows no willingness to change behavior in that period of time, then no lengthy term of supervision will achieve greater compliance. It will only be a setup for further involvement with the criminal justice system. This legislation moves us towards our ultimate goal of rehabilitating offenders and restoring communities and families. The other legislation I wanted to tell you about is Senate Bill 138, which would provide for the dignity and safety for incarcerated women. This bill will establish guidelines intended to protect the health and safety of pregnant inmates. Safety measures will include limits on shackling and body cavity searches, as well as the provision for appropriate prenatal nutrition and a bed not elevated more than 3 feet from the floor. This bill will ensure that female inmates have access to menstrual hygiene products at no cost to the inmate. At this point, they have to pay for those products. My legislation will include an important educational component. First, the bill will require the Department of Corrections and Human Services to develop training for correctional staff regarding the care of pregnant inmates, the impact of restraints and restrictive housing on pregnant inmates and fetuses, and the impact of invasive searches on pregnant inmates. Second, the bill will require educational programming for female inmates about prenatal care and parenting skills. Finally, as evidence mounts that human traffickers target vulnerable women in jails and prisons, the bill will also require educational programming about how traffickers recruit female offenders and the resources available to victims of human trafficking. The criminal justice system was designed to both protect the public and pave the way for individuals to be rehabilitated and successfully reintegrated into the community. Establishing effective reentry strategies requires many hands and collaboration with the state and county agencies, citizens, nonprofit entities, community service providers, and social service advocates to effectively use and streamline these resources. This is one reason why I think forums just like this are so important to share what is happening in our prospective states and organizations and learn from each other. That's also a reason why I am on the board of directors for the Pennsylvania Prison Society. It's an excellent organization that focuses on all of the topics that we're discussing. Thank you so much for the invitation to highlight some of the progress we've made in Pennsylvania, as well as to highlight some of the meaningful reforms we're working on in order to make our criminal justice system more efficient and fairer for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. If you don't mind, might I ask you a question or two if you have a moment?
Absolutely.
All right, great. What strikes me is that Pennsylvania, more than other states, has been, with the examples that you provided, is very compassionate and unique in the priorities that you're defining for legislation. The references and the examples that you gave for pregnant inmates, for trafficking victims, et cetera. It's not to say that it shouldn't be those priorities for other states, but very honestly, you don't hear about that from other states. So how have you not only led Pennsylvania in this effort, but what is unique about Pennsylvania that it's actually realizing these successes?
Well, I think it's a multifaceted answer for you. One, when I took office in 2015, I had never really been in politics at all. So I was looking at things through a different lens, I guess, a nonpartisan lens. What are some important issues and things that we need to focus on to change? And how can we all meet in the middle? Stuart Greenleaf, Senator Stuart Greenleaf was head of judiciary in Pennsylvania in the Senate for decades. And originally when he started out, actually back in the 90s, he was very mandatory minimum, centered and lock them up, throw away the key, then started realizing how detrimental and how wrong thinking that was for society, for the bottom line, for families, for everything. So he turned over a new leaf very, very efficiently and started backtracking on a lot of that legislation and educating many people, not just on his committee, but in the Senate and in the House. So it actually did take a while for a lot of individuals to change their thinking on those issues. But today, at least in the Senate, I think we tend to get along across the aisle more than in recent years. And we understand, both Democrat, Republican, Independent, we understand that this isn't just a fiscal issue, this is a human issue. And we realize that we haven't made streets safer, we haven't made neighborhoods safer, we haven't, we're destroying families by throwing people back in prison again and again and again and again. We have to do this better. And as far as the human trafficking element goes, I learned about that issue when I was part of a conversation with Secretary Wetzel. He's the Secretary of Corrections in Pennsylvania, and he'll be retiring in September. But he had made a comment in a meeting that he was at a seminar or something in Texas a couple years ago, and that subject was brought up. And he was asked, what are we doing in Pennsylvania about that? And he was caught off guard because he didn't even consider that as an issue. So when people get together from across the country, just like what you are doing with IJIS, and topics are being raised, others may have never even thought that to be a problem. So it's important for people to talk, communicate, collaborate. And that is where I learned about the issue. And I thought, this is what we need to do when these women get into prison. The first week that they're there, they have classes and courses and education on how to be an inmate. But this is vital for them to learn what the red flags are for human trafficking.
Well, and it's interesting because you're making reference to the convening and collaborating and sort of sharing ideas, where I think about potential next steps and how the IJIS community could support your cause and the broader reform effort. It comes to mind that I don't know how your peer states, like New Jersey, but those that are bordering you or those that are on the other side of the nation, whether they have visibility into your progress. And I wonder if that's not something, frankly, another partner group participated from NGA. So I wonder if NGA is already doing this, or I wonder if that's something that I just can't support and collaborate with, saying, look, reform is something that we're collectively addressing. Maybe get representatives from different states to share what their current programs are, and obviously seek areas of collaboration.
Absolutely. And I have been participating with a particular group for several years now. It's called SLLF. It's the State Legislative Leadership Foundation. They're remarkable. They've been around for a very long time, and they get leadership from all 50 states to go to these seminars all around the country and all around the world in the past. And I participated in some of those over the last few years, and they're remarkable. It brings in leadership from every single state. They focus on one issue. I know that in September, they're going to be in Philadelphia talking about the Constitution, but I've spoken with the leaders of that group several times, and a couple of their events were very opioid addiction centered. But I think that we really need to take a good look at incarceration, corrections across the entire country, and see where we can all come together and share best practices and share what works and what doesn't.
Wonderful. I know that you've become aware that IGES addresses programs that, of course, of a magnitude like this, that needs to look at the policy issues, the process issues, the business priority issues, the technology issues. From your experience, when we're trying to sort of climb the mountain, the experiences of Pennsylvania, what is the greatest challenge that you're seeing? Is it something that is programmatic? Is it something that is financial? Is it something that is cultural? Because I will tell you, this a short day and a half has shown that it's the people part, it's the cultural issues that are the hardest to change.
Right. I think that I think we've sort of cracked the nut a little bit, because you try to speak the language of whatever legislator you're speaking to, know your audience. And I think there was originally a preconceived notion that, oh, Republicans, they just care about the bottom line. It's all fiscal. No, it's not. No, it's not. In Pennsylvania in particular, just like I said, for years, all through the 90s, it was such a crackdown on lock them up, throw away the key, kick them back into, behind bars for every single thing. We're learning now that that's not good for communities, families, the tax base, employment, any of those things. So I think the message is loud and clear that it's not a partisan issue anymore, at least in Pennsylvania. At least that's what I'm feeling, because my Criminal Justice Reform Caucus it's senators from all over Pennsylvania, Democrat, Republican, everything. And we all share the same goal. And unfortunately, what's happened in Pennsylvania over the last 10, 15 years, almost everyone you speak to, especially because of the opioid epidemic, almost everyone you speak to has someone they know, or a family member or a friend or a colleague or a classmate who has been touched by the criminal justice system. So they're much more aware now than they ever have been that we need to make change, that people, especially those with addiction, they need rehabilitation. They don't need incarceration. And to know that, at the Department of Corrections, the word corrections is in there. It shouldn't be Department of Warehousing. The majority of people incarcerated are folks that have very little education or very poor education. And it's survival. It's a survival mechanism, really, to fall into criminal behavior. And, in the interest of full disclosure, my husband was incarcerated for 23 months. White collar crime. He was the only individual in that institution. There was a medium security prison. He was locked up with rapists and murderers and child molesters and all of that. And actually, the two of us were still friendly and communicative with 5 lifers. Mm-hmm. One of them was a juvenile lifer, and he got out because he was afforded the opportunity to have another hearing because of Miller versus Alabama. And he is a stellar citizen right now. He spent 24 years behind bars without one write-up of any kind. So my knowledge base of what goes on behind bars and prisons, especially with lifers and long sentenced individuals, is getting much broader.
Well, I will agree that it's unique, but it's provided you such a perspective of value that it's going to benefit your constituents in the state and maybe the nation that really can't even put a value to it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, we visit institutions often. I think I've been to 7 different prisons in Pennsylvania already. So, and I'm encouraging every legislator, go visit, go sit in the cafeteria, talk to people who have long sentences, talk to the lifers, get an idea of what's happening behind bars and what isn't.
Right. Experience it and understand the reality. Now, just to turn the dial just a little bit, do you see that in our new age of technology, even the fact that we're doing this virtually is already a different world than we would have lived 3 or 5 years ago?
Right.
Do you see that technology has the capacity to enable some of these processes, even to support what is that transition back to community or some of your other priorities?
Absolutely. One of my challenges all through COVID was the fact that no visitors were allowed in any way in any of these institutions. And the ability to even go to yard, even have time out of their cell for over a year. There were some inmates that were locked up in a small cell for 23 hours a day. And that wasn't part of their sentencing. So the behavioral element, the mental health element, it's going to be more challenging than ever before. But when it comes to educating individuals who are incarcerated and helping them get certification or licensing for any kind of trade or skill that then they can be, sustain themselves or go back to their family and get a job. These things are vital, and we're working very closely with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Gene Barr, who is the president of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. David Taylor, who's the president of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. They're all about getting people trained so that when they get out of incarceration, they have a meaningful, sustainable job to go to. That's very important. That prevents recidivism. That adds to the tax base. It just makes so much sense. It's an incredible return on investment.
That is incredible. And truly, the fact that that's not on front pages saying use this as a model is astounding to me. It can make a difference. Yeah, well, we might be able to help you there.
Okay, good.
Let me just ask you one more question and then offer you the opportunity for any closing remarks. Is tell us, knowing what you've grown to know about IGES, because we've had conversations in the past, and the spectrum that we deal with and the fact that we bring in public sector and private sector and academia and research groups, et cetera. What do you think that the IGES community can do to help you broadly or help reform nationally?
Well, one of the things that was very helpful to me was the fact that we included you in a criminal justice reform caucus meeting so that others were made aware of what it is you do and the opportunity for perhaps a pilot program in Pennsylvania, which would be phenomenal. To understand that one of the largest causes for recidivism and crime back in our streets is the fact that people who are back out, and 95% of people are coming back into their neighborhoods. 95%. You can't leave them in a worse situation than when they committed the crime in the first place. That's not reform, and that's not correction. So I think getting the message out that there are resources available that these individuals can use, and having that information, that toolbox ready for them before their release is vital. They need that bridge to a better way of life. And those are the things that I just can communicate and can put together and really lead to much safer streets, better neighborhoods, stronger families and communities.
Thank you. We will certainly recruit our membership and our community to help you and the broader effort. Any parting thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
I just greatly appreciate what it is you do. And I want to thank my very good friend, Mike Costigan, my middle school buddy from years and years and years ago. But just to thank all of you for what you do, and for me to be able to lean on you as an incredible resource to not only educate myself, but educate those in the caucus, those in the Senate, those in the House of Pennsylvania, so that we can really make a huge difference when it comes to Department of Corrections and reentry.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It's so much appreciated. We look forward to working with you and for you in the future. I know that our members and our audience have appreciated this chat, so thank you for your time. We appreciate that. And to our audience, please don't leave us, or I should say, please don't leave us for the day. We have another great panel that's coming up at 1:30, but that will address what are, we made reference to case studies. That's going to talk about analytics across the domain. So it takes that theory and notion of the value of data to the next step and to what we could do with it. So I thank you all for participating, and we look forward to your re-engagement at 1:30. Thank you all. Thank you, Senator. Bye.